The latest announcement about Elvis Presley's tomb in Graceland has surprised fans and stirred deep feelings. People who love Elvis are reacting with tears as they learn what is happening at his resting place. This news connects the past with the present in a very emotional way. What was announced? Why is it breaking hearts? Join us as we share this heartfelt update. The keeper of Graceland's heart. Lisa Marie Presley had always been different from the crowds that gathered outside the gates. While tourists posed for photographs and pressed their faces against the wrought iron, she carried something quieter inside her. A tenderness that came from knowing her father, not as a legend, but as the man who called her Yisa and tucked her into bed with silly voices. She moved through the world with a gentle strength, the kind that comes from loving deeply and losing even deeper. Her smile held both warmth and sorrow, and those who truly knew her understood that she spent her life trying to honor a memory while also trying to live beyond its shadow. The morning arrived soft and golden at Graceland, the kind of dawn that made the white columns glow like they were lit from within. The sprawling lawn stretched out in perfect stillness, each blade of grass holding droplets of dew that caught the early light. The mansion stood as it always had, dignified and timeless. But something felt different that day. It was the kind of difference you couldn't quite name, like the air before a storm when the birds go quiet and the sky takes on an unusual color. Everything looked the same. The peacocks wandered near the meditation garden. The famous music gate stood at attention. Yet beneath the surface of this familiar scene, there was a weight pressing down, a sense that change was coming, whether anyone was ready for it or not. In the staff quarters, Martha Jenkins had been working at Graceland for 27 years. She knew the rhythm of this place better than she knew her own heartbeat. She could tell when the azaleas needed water just by looking at them, and she understood which floorboards creaked and which doors swung open too easily. That morning, as she walked the grounds doing her usual inspection, something made her pause near the meditation garden where Elvis rested. The tomb sat surrounded by peaceful greenery, a place of quiet reverence that thousands visited each year. But Martha felt something shift in the atmosphere there, something she couldn't quite explain to anyone who asked. She stood there for a long moment, her weathered hands folded in front of her, trying to understand what her instincts were telling her. "You feel it too?" came a voice behind her. She turned to find Raymond, the groundskeeper who had been at Graceland nearly as long as she had. He was holding his hat in his hands, looking toward the tomb with an expression that mixed concern with something deeper. "Something's different," Martha said quietly. "I can't say what, but I know this place, and today feels important." Raymond nodded slowly, replacing his hat on his head. They didn't need to say more. After all these years, they had learned to trust what Graceland told them without words. By mid-morning, a black car made its way up the long driveway, moving with deliberate slowness. Inside, Lisa Marie watched the familiar landscape pass by her window. Every tree, every curve of the path held a memory. She remembered running across these lawns as a child, her father chasing after her with exaggerated slowness to let her win. She remembered hiding behind the columns and listening to music drift from the windows. She remembered the last time she saw him, the last words they spoke. Now she was returning with a purpose that had kept her awake for weeks. When she stepped out of the car, the air felt heavy with significance. She walked slowly toward the meditation garden, her footsteps soft on the pathway. The staff who saw her pass gave respectful nods but kept their distance. They recognized the look on her face, the one that said she was somewhere between this world and the world of memory. Standing before her father's tomb, Lisa Marie felt the familiar ache in her chest, the one that never quite went away no matter how many years passed. She reached out and touched the cool stone, closing her eyes for a moment. "I hope we're doing the right thing," she whispered. For months, the family had been discussing something that felt both necessary and impossibly difficult. They had gathered in quiet rooms, speaking in hushed voices about a decision that would affect not just them, but everyone who had ever felt connected to Elvis. It wasn't a choice made lightly or quickly. Every angle had been considered, every emotion examined. The decision concerned this very place, the sacred ground where Elvis had rested for decades. The family had been holding on to something, carrying it like a delicate glass object they were terrified of dropping. And now the time had come to share it with the world. Lisa Marie turned away from the tomb and found Martha standing at a respectful distance, her face full of unspoken questions. "There's going to be an announcement," Lisa Marie said softly. Something we've decided as a family. Something about this place. Martha's eyes widened slightly, but she simply nodded. She had learned long ago that some things couldn't be rushed, that the important words came in their own time. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the grounds of Graceland. The mansion stood watch over everything, keeping its secrets close. Soon the world would know what the family had decided. Soon this peaceful morning would become a moment that people remembered and discussed. But for now, in these final hours before everything changed, Graceland held its breath. What kind of decision could possibly change how people saw a resting place that had felt untouchable for so long? The stone that held too many secrets. Priscilla Presley had always possessed a remarkable grace under pressure, the kind that made people feel calm just by being near her. She carried herself with quiet dignity, never seeking attention but somehow commanding respect wherever she went. Those who knew her well understood that beneath her composed exterior lived a woman who felt everything deeply: joy, loss, responsibility, and love. She had spent decades protecting not just a legacy, but the truth of a man she had once shared her life with. Her eyes held stories she rarely told, and her gentle voice could silence a room without ever being raised. The meditation garden at Graceland had become something far beyond what anyone originally imagined. When they first laid Elvis to rest there in 1977, it was simply meant to be a peaceful place, a quiet corner where a tired soul could finally find rest. But over the years, something remarkable happened. The stone became more than stone. The earth became more than earth. It transformed into a living testament to how deeply one person could touch the world. People came from every corner of the globe to stand before that tomb. They brought flowers and teddy bears and handwritten notes. They cried tears for a man many had never met. They whispered thank yous to someone who had changed their lives through music and generosity. The tomb held all of it, every prayer, every memory, every moment of grief and gratitude. It absorbed decades of emotion until it became something sacred, something that belonged to everyone and no one all at once. But the family knew something the visitors didn't. They carried a weight that grew heavier with each passing year. Priscilla would often walk through the garden alone in the early mornings before the tours began and the crowds arrived. She would stand before the tomb and feel the familiar ache of all that remained unsaid, all that the cold stone couldn't express. Her daughter Lisa Marie would sometimes join her, and they would stand together in silence. Two women who had loved the same man in different ways and now shared the burden of his memory. "It's not right," Lisa Marie had said one morning, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know it's not." Priscilla had nodded slowly, her hand resting gently on her daughter's shoulder. She did know, they all knew. But knowing something and being ready to act on it were two entirely different things. The family had been having these conversations for years, always in private, always with a sense that they were approaching something too delicate to rush. They would gather in quiet rooms, away from the public eye, and discuss what had been troubling them. The discussions were never easy. There were tears and disagreements and long silences where everyone retreated into their own thoughts. Riley, Lisa Marie's daughter, had been the one to finally say what everyone was dancing around. "We're not honoring the truth. We're honoring what people expect, but that's not the same thing." The words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore once they had been spoken, because the tomb, for all its beauty and all the love it represented, was hiding something. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but hiding nonetheless. It told a story that was incomplete, a narrative that left out pieces that mattered deeply to the people who knew Elvis best. There were things about his final wishes that had never been properly expressed. There were feelings the family held that the stone markers couldn't capture. There were truths about who he was and what he wanted that had been overshadowed by the legend, by the icon, by the image that belonged to millions of fans. "He was more than what people see here," Priscilla had said during one of their family meetings, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I think we owe it to him to show that." The decision didn't come quickly or easily. They debated for months about whether they had the right to change something that had become so important to so many people. They worried about the reaction, about disturbing something that felt sacred. They questioned their own motives, wondering if they were acting out of grief or guilt, or some combination of both. But slowly, painfully, they came to an agreement. One evening, as the sun set over Graceland and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the family gathered one final time. They stood together in the garden, forming a circle around the tomb that had held so much for so long. Priscilla reached out and touched the stone, her fingers tracing the familiar letters. "We're not changing this to hurt anyone," she said softly. "We're changing it because we love him enough to tell the whole truth." Lisa Marie wiped tears from her eyes and nodded. Riley squeezed her mother's hand. They all understood what this meant. The courage it would take, the criticism they might face, the risk of altering something people believed should never be touched. But they also understood that some things matter more than fear. Some truths are worth the difficulty of speaking them aloud. Some changes, no matter how uncomfortable, are necessary for healing and honesty to finally coexist. The decision was made. Papers would be signed. Plans would be put into motion. Soon, the world would learn that the family had chosen to do something unprecedented. Something that would forever alter how people understood Elvis's resting place. The meditation garden would never be quite the same again. But perhaps, the family thought, that was exactly the point. What kind of courage does it take to change something the world believes should never be touched? The truth that waited in stone. Jerry Schilling had been many things in his life. A friend, a manager, a confidant. But above all, he had been loyal. His friendship with Elvis stretched back to their youth. And even now, decades after losing the man he considered a brother, Jerry carried that loyalty like a torch that never dimmed. He was known for his kindness, for the way he listened more than he spoke, and for the gentle wisdom that came from truly knowing someone beyond their fame. When he smiled, deep lines formed around his eyes, proof of a life spent finding joy even in sorrow. People trusted Jerry because he never pretended to have all the answers, and he never used his connection to Elvis for anything except preserving the truth. The morning of the announcement, Jerry arrived at Graceland earlier than requested. He couldn't sleep anyway, knowing what was about to happen. He walked through the gates and stood for a moment, looking at the mansion that held so many memories. His hands were shaking slightly, and he pressed them together to steady himself. Inside the main office, Priscilla sat at a polished wooden desk with papers spread before her. She had been awake most of the night, refining the words, making sure every sentence carried the right tone. This wasn't just an announcement. It was a sacred moment that required the utmost care. Lisa Marie stood by the window, staring out at the grounds where she had played as a child, where her father had walked, where everything had changed and yet somehow remained frozen in time. "Are we ready?" Priscilla asked softly, not looking up from the papers. Lisa Marie turned from the window, her face pale but resolute. "We'll never be completely ready, but it's time." The announcement was simple in its wording, but profound in its implications. The family had decided to alter something about Elvis's tomb that would reveal a truth they had protected for years. Not out of shame or secrecy, but out of a complicated mixture of grief, respect, and uncertainty about how the world would understand. When the staff at Graceland first heard the news, silence fell like a blanket over the entire estate. Martha, who had been arranging flowers near the entrance, dropped her shears and brought her hand to her mouth. Raymond removed his hat and held it against his chest, his weathered face creasing with emotion. "After all these years," he whispered to no one in particular. In the meditation garden, a small group had gathered. People who had dedicated their lives to maintaining Graceland, to honoring Elvis's memory, to keeping this place sacred. When Priscilla walked out to speak with them, several had tears already streaming down their faces. Not from sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming weight of a moment they somehow knew was significant, even if they didn't yet understand all the details. Priscilla's voice was steady but soft as she explained what the family had decided. "We've carried something for a very long time," she said, her eyes moving across the faces before her. "Something Elvis wanted, something that matters, and we've finally found the strength to honor it." Jerry stood beside her, and when she faltered for just a moment, he gently placed his hand on her shoulder. That simple gesture said everything. Words couldn't. "We're in this together. You're not alone. The truth is worth this discomfort." The meaning behind the change went deeper than any physical alteration could express. For years, the tomb had told one story, but it hadn't told the complete story. There were aspects of Elvis's final wishes that hadn't been properly acknowledged. There were truths about his spiritual beliefs, his relationships, his hopes for how he would be remembered, that the simple stone markers couldn't capture. This wasn't about rewriting history or changing facts. It was about finally allowing the full truth to exist in the same space where millions came to pay their respects. It was about honoring not just the legend, but the man, with all his complexity, high contradictions, his humanity. He wasn't perfect, Lisa Marie said quietly to a small group that afternoon. And I think he'd want people to know that, to understand he was real, that he struggled, that he loved deeply and hurt deeply. This change helps show that. As the day wore on, something remarkable happened at Graceland. The air itself seemed to shift. The meditation garden, which had always been peaceful, took on a different quality. As if a burden had been lifted, as if the very stones could breathe easier now that truth and memorial finally aligned. The staff members found themselves crying at unexpected moments, not from sadness, but from a strange sense of relief. Martha stood in the garden late that afternoon and felt something she couldn't quite name. The tomb looked the same as it had that morning, yet everything felt different. "It's like he can finally rest," she said to Raymond, who had joined her. He nodded slowly, understanding exactly what she meant, even though it defied logic. Some truths carry such weight that speaking them aloud changes the atmosphere of a place. Some secrets, even ones kept with good intentions, create a heaviness that everyone can feel even if they can't explain it. As evening descended on Graceland, Jerry stood alone in the garden, talking to his old friend the way he had done countless times over the years. "I hope we did right by you," he said quietly. "I hope you understand why it took so long." The wind moved through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, music drifted from the mansion. One of Elvis's songs playing for the tourists who would never stop coming, never stop loving, never stop remembering. The familiar had become new. The unchanged had transformed, and somehow, after all these years, it finally felt complete. Can a familiar place feel new when a long-held truth is finally spoken? The garden where sorrow becomes sacred. Linda Thompson had always been the kind of person who carried other people's pain as if it were her own. She had a softness about her that made strangers feel comfortable sharing their deepest hurts, and she never turned away from tears, not her own, and certainly not anyone else's. Her relationship with Elvis had ended years before his death, but the love she felt for him never diminished. It simply changed shape. She spoke of him with a tenderness that made people understand he had been more than a famous name to her. He had been someone who laughed at terrible jokes, who worried about ordinary things, who needed comfort just like anyone else. Linda's presence at Graceland during the days following the announcement brought a healing energy that everyone seemed to need, even if they couldn't explain why. The meditation garden had always existed in a strange space between two worlds. It was private property, yet it belonged somehow to everyone who had ever been moved by Elvis's music or touched by his generosity. Thousands of people visited each year, standing before the bronze plaques and white columns, each person carrying their own reasons for coming, their own stories of what Elvis meant to them. For some, it was a pilgrimage. For others, it was curiosity. But for many, it was something deeper, a need to connect with a moment in their lives when they had felt truly alive, when a song had reached inside them and changed something fundamental about how they saw the world. Linda walked through the garden on the second day after the announcement, watching visitors move slowly along the pathways. She saw an elderly woman place a single rose near the tomb, her weathered hands trembling as she stepped back and pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. A young man stood with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. A couple held each other, whispering words Linda couldn't hear, but understood nonetheless. "They're grieving someone they never met," Martha said quietly, appearing beside Linda. "And somehow, that grief is just as real as ours." Linda nodded, her own eyes filling with tears. "Maybe more real in some ways. They get to keep him perfect in their minds. We knew his struggles." This was the profound contradiction of Graceland's meditation garden. It was simultaneously the most public and most intimate place imaginable. Here, in this small patch of earth, millions of private griefs existed side by side, each person's pain somehow magnified by the presence of everyone else's. A widow who had lost her husband might cry for Elvis, but really be crying for the man who had held her hand for 50 years. A teenager mourning a grandfather might stand before the tomb and finally let out the tears he had been holding back at the funeral. The announcement had shifted something in this delicate balance. Now, visitors sensed that the family's private grief had been made visible in a new way. They felt invited into a deeper understanding, as if the walls between public icon and private person had grown thinner. Jerry spent hours in the garden during those first weeks, simply observing. He watched how people approached the tomb differently now, with a kind of reverence that acknowledged complexity rather than just celebrating legend. He saw visitors reading the announcement posted near the entrance, their faces changing as they absorbed the words, understanding dawning in their eyes. One afternoon, he encountered a middle-aged woman standing alone, tears streaming down her face. She looked embarrassed when she noticed him watching. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her cheeks. "I don't know why this is hitting me so hard. I never even saw him perform." Jerry moved closer, his gentle presence offering permission for her emotion. "You don't have to apologize for feeling something real." She nodded, composing herself slightly. "My mother loved him. She passed away last year, and I feel like I'm saying goodbye to both of them somehow." This was what the tomb had become. A repository not just for Elvis's memory, but for the countless memories that people connected to him. It held weddings and first dances, road trips and late-night conversations, childhoods and lost loves. Every person who stood before it was really standing before their own history, their own losses, their own moments of joy that could never be reclaimed except through memory. The announcement the family had made didn't erase any of that. Instead, it added a new layer of meaning. It acknowledged that the tomb, for all these years, had been telling an incomplete story, that Elvis himself, the real man beneath the legend, had held wishes and hopes about how he would be remembered that hadn't been fully honored until now. Priscilla found herself returning to the garden at odd hours, sometimes very late at night, when the tourists were gone, and only the security lights illuminated the white columns. She would stand there in the darkness, feeling the accumulated emotion of all the days and years that had passed in this space. She thought about the private grief she had carried, the loneliness of being someone who knew the truth while the world celebrated a myth. "I hope you understand why we waited," she whispered one night, her voice barely audible even to herself. "I hope you know we were trying to protect you, even if you didn't need protection anymore." The tomb didn't answer, of course. But standing there in the quiet darkness, she felt something shift inside her chest, a release perhaps, or maybe just the beginning of acceptance. They had done what needed to be done. The truth was visible now. The weight she had carried for so long could finally be set down. Lisa Marie experienced the change differently. For her, the announcement brought an unexpected sense of peace. She had spent her entire life navigating the impossible space between being Elvis's daughter and being herself, between honoring his memory and living her own truth. The decision to alter the tomb had felt like finally choosing authenticity over comfort, reality over the sanitized version people preferred. She stood in the garden one morning with her own children, explaining what the change meant. "Your grandfather was complicated," she told them. "He was wonderful and flawed and human. And that's okay. That's actually beautiful, if you think about it." Her daughter reached out and touched the stone, tentative and reverent. "It feels different now," she said. "Like we're allowed to know him better." That was exactly it, Lisa Marie realized. The announcement hadn't diminished Elvis's legacy, it had deepened it. It had transformed the tomb from a monument to an idol into something more honest, more human, more real. As weeks passed, the staff at Graceland noticed subtle changes in how the space felt. Raymond tended the flowers with renewed purpose, as if the garden had been reborn somehow. Martha found herself smiling more often when she saw visitors, understanding that they were now experiencing something closer to truth than myth. Even the physical space seemed transformed, though nothing about the structure had actually changed yet. The light fell differently somehow. The air felt clearer. The silence between visitors' whispers held more meaning. Linda returned to the garden often during those weeks, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. One particular evening, as the sun began its descent and painted everything in shades of gold and amber, she stood before the tomb and spoke aloud. "You'd be proud of them," she said. "Your family. They found the courage you always had. They told the truth, even when it was hard. A breeze moved through the garden, rustling leaves and carrying with it the faint sound of music from somewhere inside the mansion. Linda closed her eyes and let herself remember. Not the superstar, not the icon, but the man who had laughed with her, cried with her, shared his fears and hopes when no one else was watching. The tomb held all of it now. The public Elvis and the private one. The legend and the man. The carefully constructed image and the messy, beautiful reality underneath. It held the love of millions who had never met him and the grief of those who knew him best. It held decades of flowers and tears, prayers and memories, joy and sorrow existing side by side. Jerry stood at the edge of the garden as darkness fell, watching the last few visitors make their way toward the exit. His heart felt full and broken at the same time, which seemed appropriate somehow. He had spent so much of his life protecting Elvis's memory, guarding it against misunderstanding and exploitation. But this felt like protection of a different kind. This felt like setting truth free and trusting that people would receive it with the love and respect it deserved. "We did right by you, brother," he whispered. Finally. The stone stood silent in the gathering darkness, but it held more now than just names and dates. It held truth and complexity. It held the weight of a life that had touched millions, and the simple fact that beneath all the fame and mythology had lived a human being who wanted to be understood, to be remembered not as perfect, but as real. What does a stone truly hold when it carries the weight of a life loved by millions? Perhaps it holds exactly what we're brave enough to place upon it. Not just our worship, but our honesty. Not just our adoration, but our acceptance that even the brightest lights cast shadows, and that's what makes them real.